plan slides based on what the request was from Patricia and the team here, but as a teacher, I always ask what students really want. So what brought you here? What were the things that you were hoping to gain from tonight's conversation? Yes.
Well, my husband's in long-term care, and the woman across the hall was sent to Clarehouse.
Okay.
That's how I first heard of it.
Okay.
And I don't know how close it is for him, but
Yeah.
They have somebody that comes in and does it there, but to know that you could go somewhere else.
Yeah. So Susan, Susan's husband is in long-term care in one of our nursing homes in our community. And one of his hallmates was moved to Clarehouse for her last days.
It was like a week.
Yeah. And so really talking about what Clarehouse is, its unique experience for people who are in the last stages of life. And so we'll talk about that and how that fits within the bigger paradigm of hospice and then upstream palliative medicine. So we're gonna spend a little bit of time talking about just the practicalities of like the language and like what to talk about. And so you have a little bit of practical knowledge. In addition to tonight, my hope is to spend some time with you about the human experience of dying, because it really can inform some of the conversations that you might be having with family members as you consider what happens when I become ill or incapacitated. Who do I want there? What does that need to look like? So what else? Thank you. What else? Y'all didn't come because of my name for sure. Yeah.
And I think what you just alluded to
Yeah.
is to try. I've been with a husband in final days.
Yeah.
And my mother in different experiences. And I mean, no one can say exactly what they're feeling like, but I would assume in your situation, maybe you get to hear things from them that the family just can't hear
Yeah.
or accept.
Yeah, that's a great thought. So, you know, because we don't have an ethic of care in the United States, let that settle in. That dying is, you know, kind of one of the ultimates of care, right? Just at the beginning of life, the end of life is a very vulnerable, very powerful period of time for families. And so those tend to get pushed into the extremes of our experience. And so we don't know a lot about what it's like to die within the modern world, right? And what are the experiences that those that wade into the gray zone of death, right, with their loved ones, what is the impact? What can the power of that be? What can be seen and heard if we can only get out of the way of our own fears based in the taboo of what our social and societal norms around death and dying are? Yeah, we'll definitely talk about that. That's my, love that part. What else?
Basic information to share with your family,
Okay,
and dealing with, you know, your family and friends that are close to you that are going through similar things.
yeah,
And just having, you know, something there in your toolbox to be able to support.
yeah. So offering care where we can. You know, one of the things, and thank you, I just wrote a book, it's called Suffer, period. So suffering is misunderstood within the context of a human life. And as a response to that, we kind of often fall on this continuum of pity. Oh God, thank God that ain't me. Sympathy, oh bless your heart, right? Empathy, which is being able to dip into and understand someone's experience from a direct way. But empathy is not where we need to remain. It's only the first step. Empathy requires a discernment to kind of say, oh, this is what this person is experiencing. I'm able to see it, but you may not be able to do something about it, which moves it into compassion. So compassion is a self-renewing energy, whereas empathy is taking on the emotional load and processing it for someone. And so that discernment really comes with what can I do and what can't I do? And if we don't have a societal norm around the ethic of care, how is it that I know? And so a lot of people get stuck in I'm just gonna be over here, I'm not gonna pay attention to this at all, to taking on way too much, right? So we have to find a happy medium between that to offer the ability for people to discern so they can move into a compassionate, self-renewing energy of service. Yeah. Those are big topics, and I would encourage you, I can talk about this stuff until the cows come home, right? So please stop me if you have questions, if you want a clarification. I would rather this be a dialogue than me kind of typically doing the expert thing. Open your minds, let me. Okay, so let's talk about Clarehouse. Some of you have, who's been over? Okay, most people are driving by. It's between 71st and 81st on Mingo. Okay, it is the symbolic intention we have is that death and dying belong where life and living occur. And I don't know where you can find one of the most busiest places in all of Tulsa. Okay? Most people, when we drive by our home, either think it's a really fancy restaurant or an Airbnb. And when they come up and ask, oh, how can I make a reservation? It's like, well, yeah. But it's a beautiful, beautiful campus. It's meant to represent quite directly, quite literally, how the sacred can happen within the mayhem of day-to-day life. So when you come into our space, we're a 10-bed home for people who are in the last days and weeks of life. Our home usually serves people around the last 30 days of life, but we have people there that are longer because life takes its course, kind of thing. And so the reason why what we call the social model hospice home exists is because of this. In the modern US healthcare system today, we have a boatload, unbelievable amount of resources for highly, highly devastating illnesses. Things that will take your life in a matter of minutes and hours and days. We call that acute care, right? We are really good at acute care in the United States. But guess what? Access to acute care only compromises about 10% of your health. Being able to repair a broken bone, or recover from a stroke, or a heart attack, or pneumonia, or as we all experienced, COVID, right? We can rescue you from emergent injury, infection, or acute related lifestyle illnesses. But largely your health, 90% of your health is dictated by where you live, who you live with, and how you live your life on a day-to-day basis. 90% has nothing to do with the healthcare system. And as a result, we're able to take care of these really high-fangled things, and that's where we spend our money as a society. But what happens when someone's in the 90%, there is no safety net. The belief is, based on the US healthcare system that's been being built in the last 100 to 200 years, is that care is an individuated family experience and has nothing to do with the government. But we found throughout our history that that's not necessarily true, and we have other colleagues in the OECD countries, the westernized countries of the world, that we're the only Western country that does not have a caring safety net for our children, for our infirmed and disabled, and for our elderly and dying. Only one. So if there's anything that you take from tonight's conversation, is you must develop a care strategy, because the healthcare system isn't going to do it for you.
But there's Medicare.
That doesn't do anything but acute care.
Oh, right, because we pay for that.
It's hospitalizations and maybe some doctor visits. But your doctor and the office and the hospital aren't going to be with you in your home when 24/7 care is needed, right? So you must put yourself empathetically again with the knowledge that you gained tonight so that compassionately you can sit with your family and ask and talk about and give permission to, what does life look like when I need to be cared for? Or you need to be cared for? So as a family unit, we all know what we're about to do and what we are giving permission to do. Because there's nothing more difficult than being put into a crisis situation and as a spouse or a child or a parent or what have you, having to all of a sudden turn into a primary caregiver with zero to no resources. That is just the fact of the United States healthcare system. That's the way we live because we invest in the most dire of circumstances. Again, 10%, that's where we spend a large part of our money. So as an individual and an individual within a family, you must come up with the other 90% and your care strategy. Okay? So if there's anything that you take about tonight, please go and make a care strategy. We're happy to help you. We have lots of tools, we have lots of people. Brittany's here tonight, this is a resource that can get you where you need to go. Okay? So when we talk about end of life particularly, so I'm going to shape it by starting with hospice. Let's just clarify what hospice is and then how it relates to the practice of palliative medicine and the concepts of palliative care. You can thank a French dude for coming up with that word that no one can say and no one can say. So hospice is a Medicare, so the insurance that we get when we're over 65 that deals with the Social Security system and the benefit, defines hospice as the highest level of home-based care you can receive in the United States if you have a prognosis of 6 months or less. That care is episodic, meaning there is no round-the-clock care. The entire benefit, which was written in the 1980s, assumes you have a network of people to care for you. Right? Y'all know, after the 80s and the birth of the network, and the internet network in 1993, we had a massive diaspora of the family. So though we are virtually connected, we are not physically connected. And the pandemic revealed how desperate we are because we do not have a caregiving safety net in the United States like other countries do. So in hospice, large amount of people are at home, and it's usually on a spouse or on a child to care for their loved one, or if it's the other way around, a parent caring for a child. And as a result, there's caregiver burnout, there's a caregiving crisis, right? Many families go into poverty, sometimes not by choice, but to get the resources of Medicaid, which is a state-funded program. And so the system, because people are unaware of this care gap, we assume that, I have Medicare, or I have insurance, or what have you. That doesn't pay for care. That pays for hospitalization and acute illness, okay? So hospice, highest amount of health care you can get in your home. It pays for durable medical equipment. It pays for medicines. It pays for visits by your aides, your nurses, and your providers. Social worker, chaplain is also part of the team, but they come in for a short period of time and then they leave. How many of you have taken care of a dying person? How hard is it?
Hardest thing you've ever done.
So hard. So hard. And we don't talk about dying, right? We shove you in a corner and it's like, oh my God, peace out, right? And we don't teach people how to do basic caregiving. We don't teach people, would I make a different decision had I known the circumstances? So our job at Clarehouse is to recognize this care gap. So what happens is that Kelly Scott, our founder, was a hospice nurse. She's been a hospice nurse for 40 years and worked in end-of-life care and has seen it transform and seen this gap between end-of-life care in the community and people dying in their homes and the increasing number of people that are dying in the hospital. And there was a cry in the late 90s, early 2000s, as the hospice movement swept through the United States, it was like, why are we waiting to the end of life to have these dire conversations? And so gave birth to the practice of palliative medicine. So palliative medicine recognizes this issue, but we're a brand new subspecialty. Meaning, I took my boards for the very first time when they were eligible in 2010. It's a brand new subspecialty. So it says we need to have these conversations much earlier upstream, and that's what we do, but it still doesn't solve this caregiving gap. And Kelly kept seeing, okay, yes, we have palliative medicine, and yes, we're having these conversations, and people are accessing hospice, and they're getting home, and now more people are dying at home than they are in the hospital, but oftentimes, too many times, people are dying in the hospital, not wanting to do that, and or families are going into financial, economic, and emotional ruin over the process. And so was there a way as a community that we could come up with a different model to supplement this big model that we have, kind of the medical model that we have within the US healthcare system, and that gave birth to the social model hospice home, where our medical colleagues come this way from the island that is known as the healthcare system. We are, as a social model hospice home, and here at Clarehouse, we are an extension of the family and the community, and doing that 90% of your health that the healthcare system has no ability to touch. Does this make sense? We provide the family. So when you come to Clarehouse, you're coming to Aunt Kelly's house and all your cousins just have to be really good at this. When I walk in the door, yes, I have a training with an MD after my name, but I'm stripped of that identity when I walk through those doors. When I walk through those doors, I am a volunteer. I work with my colleagues who are medical directors and offer advice and offer education, but I also offer education to our staff, to our families, to our hospice colleagues and others about this process.
This is just the last month. What about all the months before that?
Exactly. Exactly. Which is why we're having this conversation, because we can only solve so much. We need to, there's a Desmond, I'm awful at quotes, so if someone knows this quote directly, please tell me. There's a Desmond Tutu quote, right? The story he tells. He came upon a young man pulling bodies out of the river. Started helping this young man pull bodies out of the river, but there was more and more coming, faster and faster and faster. And at some point, we have to decide we can no longer focus on pulling the bodies out of the water. We've got to go upstream and figure out why the bodies are going in the water in the first place. We're upstream, guys. I'm upstream right now, talking to you about this. So that you know that Clarehouse is here in our community. We also have Forticelli, which is up on the Catholic Charities campus up north. We also have the Journey Home in Bartlesville. The Journey Home is opening another home in Sperry called the Herman House. And there are several others in our state and in our region. But we can't serve everyone. We can no longer deny the lack of caregiving in our community. And we need to ask people to have a caregiving strategy. We can be in that strategy, but we can't be the sole strategy. Does that make sense? So that's how we fit within the paradigm. We partner with hospice that provides that medical care, right? And we provide the social care. Make sense? Okay. So just a little bit more about hospice. Hospice is delivered in 4 different modes. And most common one is routine home care, which is what we see in Clarehouse. It's like going to someone's home, right? Episodic care. We have people that come in days, nurse, case manager comes in, social worker, visits and leaves. So we provide that 24/7 care. And the hospices are reimbursed on a day-to-day basis. How much would you guess would it take to provide all of the equipment, all of the medicines, and all of the direct care on a day-to-day basis for a personal hospice? How much would you guess, just on per day, per cost? They get $200 per day.
That's all. That's not enough.
Yeah, that's all they get. So it goes up if someone has a distress, they can have continuous care. There's bedside care round the clock for a crisis, but it's only crisis, and it's a very short period of time. solve it, then they go to inpatient care, which is going back to the hospital. And unfortunately, because of Oklahoma's laws and the way it operates, we do not have any inpatient hospice units here in Tulsa. We have 2 in Oklahoma City. Our inpatient hospice units are places in the hospital, which was another reason why we have Clarehouse, is to solve for some of those problems, because oftentimes when people struggle at home, it's because of the social determinants. It's a rare thing to have the physical manifestations of disease not be able to be managed at home.
I've heard a rumor that the new building that South St. Francis is doing will have some of that. Is that?
Every single one of our healthcare systems have hospice and palliative medicine units within inside of them. They have providers in them. But to have a freestanding inpatient unit, we don't have that. There may be dedicated beds or wings.
Well, my understanding was what they're building at South St. Francis South will have, maybe you're called right, a whole wing or something.
They may have a floor, a handful of beds that are dedicated.
10 to 12 dedicated beds.
Yep, and each one of the hospitals have that to some extent with staff that are appropriately trained to provide end-of-life care. And then there's a thing called respite care. So if you're on hospice and your loved one's caring for you and they have to go to a wedding or travel or what have you, there's a window of time where we can put you in a facility, oftentimes a nursing home, for those 5 days per beneficiary period and all the things to give respite to the family members. But give you some insight, again, some of that logistical thought process of if my loved one is providing 24/7 care for me, what does that look like? Is that even possible? And if not, then what is the care dynamic I'm gonna create around myself in order to stay in my own home or have a plan about where I'm going to be within a family home? Again, because we're only here for the last 30 days of life, right? And so getting you to think about this, right? We gotta overcome the taboo and the discomfort and some people's fear around the experience of death and dying. So I wanted to talk to you about what that really looks like when you die in community and you die with a really good care plan. Okay? So any questions about the logistics before we get into the more nitty-gritty kind of beautiful stuff?
You take teenagers? I used to
Yeah.
practice and I had a few teenagers at a time every year
Yeah. Yeah, you and I sat across a couple of tables together.
doing hospice stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, we do.
In town here, in nursing homes mostly, but occasionally in the hospital.
Yeah, we do. We have taken care of infants with terminal illness, fetal diagnoses, and we've taken care of children and taken care of teenagers. It's a rare thing. Families oftentimes want to be in their homes, but as you can imagine, the social determinants of health can be very complex for a child, particularly a child with divorced parents. And one home versus another doesn't feel quite safe, and so we become that
We're trying
social.
to cut Medicaid in half.
Yeah, and we don't have a Medicaid
Almost all the
benefit.
coverage for these children is Medicaid.
And so any child that's taken care of on hospice in Oklahoma doesn't get paid. It's a total pro bono experience. So, again, care strategy, please.
Why is it nursing home unfamiliar?
Because nursing home is considered home. It's a resident. So if someone is in a nursing home, they receive home care. Okay? Make sense? So I'm gonna answer that question about why some families decide to come to Clarehouse. So we have, in our healthcare system, our nursing homes kind of straddle the two ends. So we have long-term care, which is the residential side of the nursing home, which is considered someone's home in the healthcare system. It's a home, it's their address where they live, right? They just happen to have 24/7 care comes at a steep price for families. Then there, on the other side of the nursing home, oftentimes there's skilled nursing, which is as a result of being in the hospital and you have to convalesce and, all of those things, someone falls, whatever it happens to be, they're only there for about 3 weeks. There's a 21-day kind of limit of being in skilled nursing, and then they move back to the home, whether that's in the long-term side or at their own homes, or back to the hospital, which is very common. And so, when people are approaching the end of life and they have entered into hospice as a nursing home resident, things get a little complicated, particularly around artificial nutrition and hydration and the use of feeding tubes. And some families have made decisions, either their loved ones have declared it, or they have a care plan that says, should there be a time where I can't eat or drink on my own, I do not want artificial nutrition and hydration because it's recognition the body is dying. But some nursing homes aren't so cool with that. And so there's a conversation that either works with the hospice or doesn't, and some families choose to come to Clarehouse because they don't want to deal with that. Okay? So care plan also needs to include having conversations about artificial nutrition and hydration and resuscitation status, like DNRs and all of those kind of things, and make it very clear, should something happen to my loved one while they're in the facility, whether in the long-term care side, do we want them transferred to the hospital or not? So there needs to be clear conversations about that. Otherwise, the option is to always do. You have to have informed refusal of said do. Informed refusal, just like informed consent. If you have informed refusal, there's a lot of paperwork that says, this is my care plan, this is how I want to be cared for, this is what my wishes are. Make sense?
You have to make those clear, because people will not honor
Make
your
it
wishes.
clear. And you have to have your person, your healthcare proxy, your decision maker, know what those plans are. But that requires you to have a plan.
Right.
And communicate said plan.
Right.
And this is not just a DNR, and it's not just a, what's the other?
There's an advanced directive, right? When someone can't speak for themselves, right? But this also includes a do not resuscitate order and a do not transfer order. So, lots of those kind of conversations, and having a really good conversation with the interdisciplinary team, if you happen to be in a facility, or that interdisciplinary team happens to be all of your kids and your siblings and your spouse, right? So, like we were talking last night, we had a community conversation series. One of our friends does not allow anyone to have Thanksgiving dinner until they've all signed and reviewed their advance directive. So that, you laugh about that, but that's a jovial way to kind of enter into these conversations, right? One of my friends decided to give her advance directive to each one of their kids in their stockings. Because I will tell you, it's a profound gift to unburden your family of having to make those decisions for you. And when you open those conversations, the richness that comes out of those conversations, you'll be surprised when you find out about your loved ones. So, again, care plan. I have. Okay. Did you communicate it? Did you talk about it?
We've reviewed it, I know where it is.
Because there is nothing more painful to be a palliative medicine physician and be called to the emergency room to come talk to a family member because they are dying. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, I pick up the phone, hey, your loved one's here, in the emergency room, they've named you as their healthcare proxy. This is what you're seeing, based on everything I understand, this is what I would recommend, but the decision is yours. And they're like, they named me what? And what's happening? I have no idea. Why am I making this decision? And so we have to interpret advanced directives, we have to interpret things, but most of the time it is we will do until we have other directives. So the plan is always to do, always to intervene, always to intubate, always to resuscitate. Always. Until it's clearly articulated that you've opted informed refusal of said procedures. These are procedures. Okay? Make sense? Any other logistical questions before
families in crisis may not come up with that quickly, but usually a church office could have a file folder and access that.
You know, as a community, that's the beautiful thing that you have as a church community. You can determine as a community how you want to share those things. When someone has an advanced directive, it belongs in several places. Okay? So, on your person somewhere, so in your pocketbook or in your glove compartments, on your person somewhere, okay? A lot of people, you can actually download a wallet card that says, I have an advanced directive. It needs to be your primary care physician's office. It also needs to be with your healthcare proxy, so your healthcare proxy needs to have a copy. Ideally now with the phone, it's nice, because you can put it in the emergency contact thing. You can take pictures of it, there's all sorts of, so it's nice to have it on your phone, you know, kind of thing. It also needs to be at the hospital that you would likely go to.
Kristen, I don't know how hard it is.
Yeah, so, you know, if you're within Utica Park, or if you're in St. John's, or in St. Francis, typically they all talk to each other now, which is lovely.
But then in your my chart.
Yeah, as long as it's in the system, in the computer system, it should pop up. But as a community, you could decide, is there a local resource that we have here? So that if you have a care team that shows up at the hospital, you have that copy.
How about your attorney?
Well, you know, is your attorney gonna be awake at 3 o'clock in the morning? Safety deposit box? No, you wanna be able to think about it, when you need it, it's always in the off hours. Biggest heart attacks happen at 6 o'clock in the morning. Strokes usually 3 o'clock in the morning, so. Yeah,
I think it's important for people to know that Medicare, when you have your annual exam with your primary care, they will pay for you to have an end-of-life discussion with them. And get those basic pieces of your advanced directive on their chart, which will be on my chart, which will be in the hospital at 3 o'clock in the morning. Who your proxy is, what your basic desires are, and that should be reviewed every couple of years, because what you say now might be different than what you say when you have a diagnosis of cancer or severe heart disease, or, you know.
yeah, and advanced directives change, it often pretty much stay the same. It's when you decided to put a DNR in place. You know, outside of a crisis. That's usually the biggest conversation. Most people, when they come into our Medicare kind of conversations, they know. They're like, oh, no, I want this, and I don't want that. And the question always becomes, when do I put a resuscitation order in place? That's usually the thing that changes quite significantly. But it should be part of your routine yearly Medicare visit. There should be a normalization of, do you have an advanced directive? Yes. Do we have a copy? No, I need a copy.
I've been in hospital situations when two siblings and there was no care plan.
Yeah.
And they were at each other's necks.
Yep.
And one insisted that 92-year-old mom be resuscitated again for the 3rd time with broken ribs. And just to be in the midst of the confusion of the family, it's a real gift to give them so that that doesn't happen.
Yeah, it will tear families apart. The complex grief associated with it. And so waiting for that disaster to occur to sort out, because we're too afraid to have those conversations now. I will tell you, we'll have lasting intergenerational trauma.
It gives the family permission,
Totally.
which I would assume then relieves somewhat of guilt or.
Or, you know, what am I an agent of death? I mean, the ethic around that is really hard to overcome if you don't understand that decision. Most people don't.
Or just always second guessing, do I make the right choice?
Yeah, exactly. It relieves everybody of that. I mean, it's already hard to feel grief, which we can talk about. Totally changes your brain chemistry. To feel grief, most people don't. It's too hard. So we just squash it down, and then all of a sudden we have complex grief that then turns to often physical illness, because the body does distort, despite some of the stuff around that. It does. The body does that, and so when you have complex grief, because you're worried about all of these decisions, it now affects you and perpetuate this taboo around death and dying being this horrific thing that needs to be shoved in the corners and the recesses of our community.
You just don't like to talk about it.
Yeah, so
We're playing for it.
So I'm gonna give you a little bit of joy around this very experience of dying. Okay?
Okay.
So I'm happy to continue the conversation about logistics, but I want to give you some thoughtful spiritual experiences around the human experience of death and dying. All things we can look forward to and plan for. Create to. Everybody know Abraham Maslow, Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Okay. Huge fan of Abraham Maslow. I think I had an affair with him in some other life. Spent so much time thinking about his work. So in the 1960s, he was a young 50-year-old who sustained a heart attack at a very young age, and as a result had heart failure that ended up taking his life in 1970. But in the decade that he was grappling with his own mortality, he really came to understand this concept, what we call mortality salience. So salience is anything that draws our attention. So the sun pouring through here is kind of salient. Right? I keep seeing it on your faces. It's kind of gorgeous, right? It's very salient. How is it that we can turn that salience, that attention into death? As every moment that we are living. That's what mortality salience is. And what he found is people who are highly self-actualized, the highest evolved humans, have a high degree of mortality salience. They are aware of the beauty and the fragility of the human life. And so, one of these quotes, this is a quote that has driven my entire practice. It is quite clear that we are always suffering from this cloud that hangs over us, this fear of death. If you can transcend the fear of death, that means not deny it, but embrace it. Understand that yes, we're animal species that have a very, very strong survival mechanism. I mean, it just comes with the brave, right? If we can transcend that, use our human brain, our creative brain to transcend this fear of death, which is possible. If I could now assure you of a dignified death instead of an undignified one, of a gracious, reconciled, philosophical death, your life today, at this moment, would change. The rest of your life would change, and every moment would change. And I agree with him that we can totally teach this transcending of what we call the sense of self, or the human experience. But we have to start talking about it. We have to start demonstrating and speaking to these profound experiences that we do see at Clarehouse and in other places that are death aware. And what can happen not only to the person in the bed, but the families surrounding them and the community that support them. People say that death is actually the most creative moment of a human life. Anybody who has died and come back to tell us, they will tell you, oh my gosh, if I only knew, and now I know I'm going to live my life differently. It's the highest transcendent moment that we have as a human. And we are so afraid of it. And so how do we learn to bring it out of the darkness? Bring it into our day-to-day lives, make it more salient, so I can plan to and live towards this profound moment that's at the weight at the end of my life. Right? If I were to ask you in this moment to pause and say, what feeling would you hope? What is the prominent, predominant feeling you would hope for at your deathbed? Don't think about it. What's the emotional experience you want at your deathbed?
Peace.
Peace. Right? Peace. Love. Calm. If you don't plan for it, do you think that's going to happen? Based on everything we just talked about? Right? If you don't live with calm and peace, you sure are going to die with calm and peace. They go hand in hand. Okay? 4-part process. And you tell me how long do we have, because I want to spend some time with it. Okay. So we got about 15 minutes, if I understand. I'm happy to stay longer if you want to. So this was discovered by a friend of mine. His name's Sam Pernia. Sam's up at the NYU Langone. Sam is a resuscitation scientist.
Oh, cool.
He's not only an ICU physician, he is like the be-all end-all of resuscitation scientist. So if there's an opposite of me, he would be it. Okay? And Sam studies what we call recalled experiences of death. He's so good at resuscitation, most of his patients come back and have these recalled experiences of death. And they are like, Doc, how am I supposed to live my life right now? And so from an ethical standpoint, he's introducing this new way of living and experiencing life, and he felt responsible in naming it. And saying, as a society, we need to be much more conscious about that. So Raymond Moody, most of you may have heard of, he wrote a book called Life After Life in the 1970s, and the concept of a near-death experience was named for the first time. He's a beautiful human who was a philosopher before he became a physician, and named this concept of near-death experience in the 11 kind of experiences that happen. Why this is happening, some people could conjure we're in the middle of an evolutionary jump, but a lot of people are having more and more near-death experiences as we experience things like meditation more, and higher spiritual practices that extend past the religious context. We're having more people use psychedelics in the psychedelic renaissance and really exploring different facets of consciousness, explorations of nature, the use of music to induce expanded states of consciousness. We're seeing more and more people have near-death-like experiences. And Sam wanted to study people who actually died. Not near death, but people who are actually clinically died. These people, not only their heart stops, brain stops. But what Sam found, just hold your phone on this one. Sam found after those moments that the brain demonstrated what we call high gamma. So it went from flatline to the highest function of a human brain 30 seconds after the moment of death. We don't know how long it lasts. There are some studies that show that cellular activity happens in the brain and in the body up to 5 days after the moment of death. So, with that perspective, right, it becomes what's happening, right? We start talking about this whole the concept of consciousness. Consciousness is the scientific term for the soul. We use the word that. It's really interesting as someone who deals with death and dying, we didn't have the language to talk about that even a decade ago. And now it's a presumption that consciousness actually exists as an entity. And the big question that we have in science is it what we call the physical model, which is it's an emergent property of the human brain. Obviously, you can see my views on that. Or is it a more physicist model, a quantum physics, that we are a receptor to a much greater energetic field that exists in and through us, despite if we're conscious of it or not. And so, the study of recalled experiences of death, it's almost like it comes full circle, where we have resuscitation science that is actually informing really good end-of-life care, and hopefully, in talking about death and dying, it informs higher levels of life and living. So I'm going to take you through what people who have recalled experiences of death tell us. And to your point, they are consistent across demographic, across socioeconomic, across cultural, across age, across the world. It is a human experience, regardless of what you do and how you got there. Okay? So the first thing that people tell us, and these aren't linear, meaning they're pretty potent to each other, meaning one has to open before the other opens, but they kind of grow and shrink and come back and forth, okay? So I don't want you to go through like Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief. That's not what happens. Grief is really, 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 really messy. And it's all, there's no linear nature to it at all, okay? And similar to this, these are 4 of the prominent experiences that happen in the process. So when someone is approaching death, there is an awareness of what we call separation of the body. How many of you have been in a deathbed of someone declaring, oh, I will see you in the morning, Dr. Clark. Right? That's one of the reasons why I love rounding in the middle of the night, because you get truth comes out of the woodworks, right? So there's this perception that we're separating from the body. And often if people have not had some sort of spiritual practice, it can be very, very uncomfortable, because it's like, if I'm not this body, then what am I? I'm separating from my body. This is really weird. What am I? What is this, right? So there's an awareness that the body is dying. And often a declaration in some way, shape, or form. The next thing that happens as we become more and more aware that the body's dying, the body's going through the physical process of dying, an emergent experience of terminal restlessness occurs. It often takes on the theme of journeying or heading to a destination. Often people will describe tunnels and lights and all sorts of different things, particularly when they're dreaming. But when they're in a more conscious state, because at this point they're vacillating between periods of very deep sleep and wakeness, they will send their families on wild goose chases. I need you to go fix the refrigerator. I need you to get my shoes and my passport and my keys. And you're like, where are you going? I don't know, but I need those things. And think about going on the biggest trip of your life and the anticipation of that, right? Some people get wicked excited. Some people get really, really nervous. And so it causes this restlessness. It often causes people to be restless in the body. They will scoop themselves down to the end of the bed if they're bedbound. They'll kind of pick at themselves. They'll move around, all sorts of different things, because the body and the mind and the spirit are separating, and the body's the only way we can move most of the time. So it becomes very restless. As that restlessness goes on and you're having more and more periods of deep, deep sleep, we're moving into the 50 to 60% of the day a person is in bed and unarousable. In those moments, the brain is thought to move into a very highly integrated state that's very similar to what we see in SAM's patients after they die. High gamma is a highly integrated brain state where all lobes of the brain are firing all together. So left side, which is your sense of self and all your, you guys know about the voice in your head. He lives right up here. Left side, it's necessary to move in this world. Right side, though, is the home of our consciousness and the home of our spirit, and we often don't access it. In prayer and in meditation is oftentimes the first time people feel that, or if you're an athlete, if you're listening to music, or if you're in nature and you get bamboozled. Those flow states are when our left and right brains are integrated. And in high gamma, not only is our left and right brain integrated, but our conscious and unconscious all come in one big value story. And so we see in those periods of deep sleep, people enter into this highly, highly integrated brain state. And as a result, they start entering into a thing called life review. It can be hard. It can also be profound and joyful, because you get to relive every moment of your life, all the experiences, emotional, sensory, perceptive experience, from your own viewpoint and the viewpoint of anyone your life has ever touched.
Not sure I want to do that.
You're saying, no wonder you need to sleep a lot.
It's not linear. You go out of space-time. It happens within seconds, oftentimes from our perspective. But people live through a lifetime during these periods of time. So not only are they undergoing life review, and sometimes we have to bring our traumas of our past into the present with us to go on to the next, to make ourselves whole. So people will come out of these periods of time and have to process it. That's what we do. help people process some of those things and make any repairs that they need to repair. I highly recommend doing this before you're dying, because if you don't deal with life, death will do a bit for you. Okay?
Is that, do people, you know, prior to, so do you sometimes see a specific event that other people don't remember? And, you know, we had that in my family. My husband, you know, he wasn't in the throes of death right then, but he brought up some little tiny event that none of us recalled and apologized to my son. It's like, and it didn't even sound like him. We really don't know if there was some confusions going on. So we don't know if it was confusion because it was not characteristic of his personality. But maybe that day it happened, I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's surprising when these declarations occur, and oftentimes there's big obvious ones, but we have these small little events that have rippling, kind of ripple that we don't understand until we're confronted with it. And so that's self-reflection, right? That's, I grew up in the Catholic tradition. I mean, that's all confession was really intended to do, is to ask you to pause and reflect on your life and say, what do I need to make amends for? Right? What do I need to be grateful for? And speak those aloud in community, in relation to the people that matter most to you.
It can, I mean, I could see that being bigger than that little event.
Totally.
You know, just, okay, I'm sorry for all that I've done.
It could
To all of
represent,
you.
it could represent something,
Yeah.
that was a chronic kind of behavior that all of you kind of suffered from, right? So it's a profound experience. So not only are you get to do this from your viewpoint and from the viewpoint of others, but the thing that really is really powerful is that every single one of them will tell you that they are wrapped in unconditional positive regard. Kids will tell you they're wrapped in angels' wings. In angels' wings. When you start going through life review, you feel a presence with you. Some people will tell you it's compassion embodied. Some people will tell you they have an angel. Some people will be with a loved one. But the whole concept of atonement and judgment day that we have in our Christian traditions is not what actually happens. You are sat with this entity, this feeling of unconditional positive regard, and regardless of what you've done in this lifetime, you're held, and you come to understand what you've learned and what this lifetime has brought to you into the development of your consciousness. That's what they tell us. Yeah.
Is there any research done on people with dementia?
Yes. So what we've seen is a thing called paradoxical lucidity. So talk about planning for. When you are in community, people feel safe and they're able to walk with their loved ones into this experience. Oftentimes, people are vacillating between these deep, deep sleep states. They're undergoing life review, wrapped in unconditional positive regard. We often see this thing called paradoxical lucidity, where people will come back to themselves for a period of time before the actual event of death. It's unbelievable. We have seen it at the house. I mean, I got goosebumps thinking about the 4 to 5 times we've seen it just in the last handful of years. But that's the thing. If we don't plan for these extraordinary, miraculous experiences, you can't expect the content to happen if the context isn't there. And so we see dementia patients, they tend to languish. Their experience is a little bit more fractured, but we see this paradoxical lucidity more frequently than you would expect, where they do have a period of time where this highly integrated brain state brings them back to themselves, and they know who they are, they know who their children are, and didn't do that. They do that for a handful of hours, and then often succumb to death. And then as the life review continues to unfold, it's becoming clear and it moves to its closing end. As they approach the last minutes, hours, and days of life, they start getting flashes of what they call home. Home can be many things to many people, but it's this feeling of wholeness, feeling of care and wonder and awe and, complete integrity. And we see that happen in the body. We actually see when people move into that state, there's this just release of the face, there's this release of the experience, and then usually the moment of cardiopulmonary death comes to me. And at Clarehouse, we understand that dying doesn't just stop when the heart stops, that it's an ongoing process, as we talked about, that can last for minutes and hours after the moment that the heart stops. And so we actually hold that period of time for about 30 minutes to be very, very sacred, let the body finish the process, so that the person is guided to do whatever else they do after death.
It can take days and babies.
It can.
Babies don't, their hearts keep going for days
Yeah.
sometimes.
Babies, sometimes in young patients, they languish a little bit. Babies, it's really interesting. So I'm a pediatrician in addition to an internist, so I take care of babies for a lot. And they don't have any sensory, they don't experience separation like we do. We're not separate from the whole. And so that's why it's harder for them to go through the dying experience, because they're already enmeshed in the field, right? So it's just waiting for the body to go through the process.
That's interesting, because at the nursing home, they can't wait to call the people to come take the body away.
Yeah, right, we gotta get it out of there,
Right.
right?
When my sister-in-law died, she says, I want you all to stay in the room with her for about half an hour.
Yeah.
She was in Integris
Yeah,
Hospice.
and you just
And
be with her and just tell her that you love her and it's okay. Yeah, it's okay, right? But really keeping that time very sacred and understanding they're going through this profound thing, the last thing they wanna do is come back and eat. Or drink and sure. Yeah, so perceived death and separation from the body. The next one is heading to a destination, followed by reliving and recording of life that is educational. And here's all the things I just talked about. And I'm happy to send this to you if you want to send it to people. Totally, you guys can totally have this. Held in unconditional positive regard, reliving of your life's events, experiencing the perspective of others. As you can imagine, this thing called the truth of the matter happens, where you understand the chain of events and the bigger picture of how you fit into the micro, how small we are. We're a speck of dust in the existence of human life. Understand whatever good and whatever harm was done, I did to myself. Overall higher purpose to one's life that then gives this idea that there is a human dignity and universal moral code that exists among us. And then this hierarchy of knowledge and expanded existence. Yeah.
So what would you say to family members who have experienced a very, very difficult death?
Yeah. Helping them understand why it was difficult. Understanding what was it, because it's interesting, right? So suffering is actually about your sense of self. It's our nature to suffer, right? So you have eyes that see, ears that hear, nose that smells, you have a heart that emotes, a gut that feels, a brain that thinks, and you have a self that suffers. So every person in that family suffered in a different way. And so understanding what constituted a bad death is in the viewpoint of their experience. And so there's no right or wrong answer to that. But the big thing is, if we want to die in community, we want to have a planned experience, we need to have those conversations and a care plan and strategy for that. We can hope for the best and plan for the rest, right? And so we have this being wholeness. So again, I'll ask you if I could guarantee you dignified death, a rectified, reconciled, philosophical death, your life would change in this way.
just Google PBS caregiving, then it'll take you to the website and you can watch it on the website.
Bradley Cooper